Recent chaos has gripped some of South Africa's poorest townships ahead of municipal elections on August the 3rd. The Rainbow Nation is facing its most severe political crisis since the end of apartheid in 1994. President Jacob Zuma has faced hundreds of accusations of corruption, but has managed to hold onto his job. His ruling party, the African National Congress, or ANC, has been in power since the end of white minority rule. But many say the Party of Liberation hasn't delivered on its promise to lift millions of South Africans out of poverty. And the continuing allegations of corruption are hurting the country's once vibrant economy. The crisis has also led to the rise of voices like Julius Malema and his leftist Economic Freedom Fighters Party, or EFF, which wants to nationalize the banking and mining sectors and take over white-owned lands. It is within this unstable political, social and economic landscape that Al Jazeera traveled to South Africa to talk to young people who feel politicians are failing them. Deep in the Soweto township of Johannesburg in Kliptown, a place infused with the history of the struggle against apartheid, we meet 23-year-old Siphamandla Mbongwane. He's a rare example of success in a neighborhood entrenched in poverty.
I think the government has been failing people so much, and people are getting angry every time, and that anger is building and building to people. So people, in fact early this year, people were mobilizing people from Cape Town. They were like, we don't have housings, and it's been so long that the government has been promising us, saying next year we'll build houses. The only time that they come here is when they know that there are votings. There will be votes maybe in 2 months, in 3 months' time. They come here and then they promise everyone to say, you know what, we'll build you houses, and people get so excited, and then they vote, and then after that, it does not happen.
Why do you think people haven't simply voted this government out of office? Get a new government.
Yeah, that's the problem. I feel like people are so loyal to the ruling party right now in South Africa.
To the ANC.
To the ANC, yes. But people are so loyal to, especially old people, they are very, very loyal to ANC because they believe that it was the main political party that brought freedom in this country. And yes, it was the political party that brought freedom in this country. But what are they doing now? See, now it's all about corruption. Everyone want to do things for themselves. The leaders, they've forgotten about the people. All they think about is them and their families and their friends, and they forget about the people that they are serving. Myself, I feel like if there's nothing that is being done by the ANC, then they must just move out. I used to love ANC so much, but now in fact, I love the political party. But I don't like what the leaders of the political party are doing. But for me, it's not about the party. It's about who's doing the job right. Then if the EFF is doing the job right, I'll vote for EFF. If the ANC is doing the job right, I'll vote for the ANC. So it's not about which party, but it's about who's doing what.
Boy, how old are you?
I'm 22, and I'm going to be 23 in November.
Wow. So you were born on the cusp. You were born at the moment of change in this country, 1994.
1994.
You were both born free and baby Rainbow Nation.
Yes.
Are you disappointed with what has happened since?
To be honest, I am very, very disappointed. I've studied history as well, and I've seen, looking at how our political leaders, the former political leaders, the radical political leaders, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, how they fought for this freedom, and other people as well who have lost their lives so that we may live in a free country one day. And I look at those kind of things and I see the opposite. I see what you can find now in the parliament, it's only corruption. That drives me so crazy. So I feel that's why I'm saying I'm so disappointed, because I know that Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, and all these political leaders, they were not fighting for this. They were fighting for a better South Africa where everyone will be equal, where economically, in everything, where people will be the same. But it does not happen. You look at our economics right now, in terms economically, there is a very vast difference between whites and blacks. You find it, and it's not just a small difference, it's a very big difference that anyone can see. Whites, they are just there, and then blacks, they are just here, except the people that are in our leadership, except the people that are, that are doing things now, and except them and their families. So I feel like, these people were just fighting for few families. They were just fighting for few individuals so that they can live well.
You've described your disappointment with the past. How do you feel about the future? Positive?
To be honest, right now, the future, if only people would act against corruption, this country can regain whatever that it was fighting for in those years. If people can not be blinded by the political parties, by their loyalty in the political parties, and do what's right, for the country, I think this country will have a great future ahead. Because as a young person right now, I think of my children. I think of the generation after me, and I want this generation to be the kind of generation where we'll fight for results, and then the next generation will see the results, not just sugar-coated results, a similar part of what was happening, but to see exactly a great future for them to live a good life, for them to access, education, to do all these kind of things that we cannot easily do. It's so difficult for a young person from Kliptown to go out and study in the university. I'm the second person in this whole Kliptown, and it's so sad because you have very bright people.
Why do you think you were so fortunate? Why were you one of the only two people to leave Kliptown and get an education?
You see, here in Kliptown, a lot of young people, as I was growing up in Kliptown, many young people, we had this stereotype to say, when you're from Kliptown, you will never make it to become a doctor, you will never make it to become a lawyer or to become a psychologist, anything. You will never amount to anything. The only job that you can do is to go and work in construction or in shops and everything like that. And I grew up with the same mentality, and until I was in my grade 10, I made a decision to say, I will change this thing. I will change this kind of mentality. If I will be the first one or I'll be the second one, I don't care. But I will go to university and I will become a psychologist one day. And then if I do that, all these kids that I work with, young kids that are coming after me, they will look at me and say, if boy could do it, I can also do it. And it is one of the things that have always been pushing me forward. It made me to go all out.
One of the challenging issues in post-apartheid South Africa is the busing of black children from townships like Johannesburg, Soweto, where Siphamandla lives. Many children attend state-funded schools in former white-only suburbs, which are well-resourced and have better teachers. During apartheid, the government spent 4 times more on white schools. That disparity is no longer the case, but the legacy is still there. In Johannesburg, 26-year-old Carisha Shea, who teaches history to young girls and believes the root of the problem lies in segregated schooling, talks to Al Jazeera.
You're a year out of university, a year into teaching in South Africa, so you have perhaps a unique perspective. Is there a crisis in education in South Africa?
There is a crisis. It happens on many different levels. And we do have a legacy, a problem that has its roots in apartheid with segregated schooling. The class segregation in South Africa has stayed, if not worsened. So we do have a huge gap between the rich and the poor, and that has fed down into education.
Is government adequately prioritising education?
Definitely not. When you're in a crisis, you need immediate interventions. It needs to be the talk of the century. The talk of the day, where it's seen as a crisis, and it has been labelled as a crisis. Our Minister of Education has finally said that it is a crisis, but I don't see. I mean, all we hear about is this launching of iPads into underprivileged schools, which is a terrible idea. It's a what's the word? It's a band-aid or a plaster on a gaping wound. And so there's no structural, I haven't seen any structural address to the problems. I've only seen patch jobs.
What are the sorts of things you hear from your kids?
What I've observed in this very short time I've been teaching is that the kids today, they are Rainbow Nation babies. So in good schools where the programs have run quite smoothly, you've got kids raised on quite a liberal education that has taught them that it's up to them to make their own way in this life. I don't feel like they relate to what's going on in Parliament. I mean, more and more so since the EFF and a young political movement has risen.
Julius Malema's party.
Yes. So
with fairly radical ideas.
Right. And a lot of them are, I think, because of parents' views, a lot of them are a bit freaked out by this radicalness and the disrupting in Parliament. So there seems to be a surge in youth interest in politics. But at the same time, I teach at an all-girls school, and they say, you know what, ma'am, none of these parties speak to us at all. So I was trying to encourage them, well, then maybe you need to start your own political party. So they have this disillusionment with the politics, but at the same time, they have, for the first time, are watching the State of the Nation address because it's exciting. For the first time, people are talking and speaking out in Parliament, and it's not a top-down approach. So we've been talking a little bit about this exciting wave of politics.
Of change and of disruption.
Yeah, of disruption, yes, the politics of disruption.
Young people's interest in politics is part of South Africa's history. Student protests go back to the anti-apartheid movement that predated South Africa's democracy. And last year's widespread university student protests have specific roots in apartheid and colonialism, underlying youth anger over the legacies of racial discrimination, unemployment and income inequality.
And has government engaged with these various student movements, responded to them positively?
No, not at all. I think I will be forever changed by seeing state violence right up front. So police presence, police brutality.
In the protests last year that you witnessed?
In the protests, late nights, the happenings where police would show up unexpected and start tear gassing and rubber bullets. And you just realize that this is a peaceful protest for free education in this country. It's a furthering, and I cannot believe in this present modern day, 20 years after such hectic state violence, that we're experiencing that same. But again, the footage is all out there. It was completely transforming. I think that made me be quite critical of our government now, and critical of democracy because of how they responded.
Why do you think the government felt that it needed to crack down quite so violently on those student protests?
I think they were scared, they were threatened. It pointed out huge holes in the system, and it pointed out a lot of corruption. Anything that challenges power will, I think will be met with violence.
You say what you saw and what you experienced changed you profoundly. What did you feel at that time? Talk me through something that happened to you and how you felt.
Well, when we were protesting, when we were sitting down and or peacefully holding a vigil, and police would come in and police would just, march into Parliament where there has not been a police presence since the 80s on our campuses. And when you're directly met with that arm, that force, this shield of a policeman, everything you've learned about a government, everything you've learned about a democracy, your politicians are speaking for you, it just falls flat on its face, because you're fighting for something that is only beneficial. I mean, you see it that way as a student. You're fighting for what you think is right, and this is how the state responds. So I think my whole version of what the government is to me was the rug was swept out from under my feet.
You talk about yourself being a Rainbow Nation baby, born before 1994. As such, did you have expectations of what democracy would bring this country 22 years down the line? And do you feel that they've achieved what you'd hoped they would achieve?
I think as this Rainbow Nation baby, or that's the education system I was born in, I think you're raised to believe that we need to all work together to better the society, the whole Ubuntu rhetoric. And I think it is good and it's a peaceful message. But I think I'm still in a state of disillusionment where being a part of this movement, you just meet people who are experiencing they are experiencing the wrath of the state or So I'm now very cynical of the Rainbow Nation message. I hope I could return to believing it one day, but I don't want to believe it at the expense of not addressing really historical long-term issues that need to be addressed. But I'm also very cynical, and I've seen when in the movement you were just let down every single day by your leadership.
As a white person in South Africa today, are you still aware that you occupy a position of great privilege?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I'm what the system wants, and what the system, the system works for me. It was created for me, a person like me. So it's been...
And in 22 years, essentially, that hasn't changed?
No, not at all. No. You've got your cases, your anecdotal cases, and a wave of a rising black middle class, but I feel like I can name them, or we talk about it because it's a rare entity, and so I'm trying to grapple with, because I'm a product of this system, and because it was created for me, what do you do with that privilege? And I'm trying to decide what I need to do with that.
What motivated you to want to be an educator, a teacher in this society?
I think I've been so transformed by people that I've met. I love talking to people, understanding their story. I've been so transformed by what I've learned. And history, so I'm a history teacher. There has been, when you find those nuggets of information that change everything about things that you knew about certain political parties, certain splits that happen that politicians have covered up in political parties, and there's such fascinating information out there that if it can be harnessed in the right way, it could change things. But there's just so much to offer. And history especially, when you find out about what's happened in the past and certain decisions that key individuals had to make and key people that weren't big or great men, but the people, when you find out how much power the individual does have to change things or to rebel against a corrupt system, you want to tell the kids that that's possible. You want to show them that there are other ways to do things, and that we don't have to be entrenched in a capitalist system that is exploitative. We can work within it, or we can denounce it and try something different.
Over 1,000 kilometers from Johannesburg, in the heart of Cape Town, we meet Tuto Guampe. He's 21 and a born free, a term that describes those who were born after the end of apartheid. Like Carissa and Sipamantla, he's cynical of the Rainbow Nation message.
Regardless of which party you vote for, this is my own opinion, regardless of which party I would vote for, I actually see the exact same characteristics in every one of them. And none of them offer the same type of view or vision for my generation as they claim to have. So the governance of the country right now is a very, very, very confusing thing for all of us. It's very infuriating, frustrating, and it's tiring, it's taxing on every single South African. But as it is, it's not going to change unless unless we actually make a change. So
what sort of change? What's the change that you would like to see?
Like an actual party with youth in it. I'm tired of seeing countries run by old presidents from who've experienced a country 20 years like before where it is now. Because what they have is a vision of the past and not actually what it is now or where it could go. And they just dismiss any vision or any idea of like at least change. And that's the most infuriating part for like a lot of youth today.
It sounds to me like you've lost faith, in a sense, in conventional politics and conventional politicians. Is that true for your generation as a whole, do you think?
I wouldn't say it's true for all of us as a whole, but like, there is a percentage of us. I wouldn't say it's small, but there is a percentage of us that are disenfranchised by the way things are being run and the way we're being represented to the rest of the world. And that is the thing that is actually causing a lot of all these frustrations and a lot of these tensions that are happening on a lot of these universities.
Would you go so far as to say that South Africa needs a change of not just leadership, but a change of party in government? I mean, is the ANC in danger of losing its real majority?
It is, but the thing is, with a lot of South Africans, they would never vote for the DA. Why? Because we're afraid, because a lot of them, they're afraid that like what happened in the past will be brought back by the DA. As like in Cape Town, as beautiful as it is, there's a lot of inequality here. Like you will find Tamboeskloof, a very, like it's a Lonnie, how can I say, if I could demographic, it's a very white area. But as soon as you go to the locations, the townships, you can see how much of a lack of infrastructure there is. And that is actually what like most South Africans are afraid of. Like that's why they won't vote for DA.
And where do people like you turn in that case?
We turn to each other. Instead of like turning to the government or all of these higher sources of power, we turn to each other instead of like trying to change a system that will in no way change to suit the needs of the many.
Light at the end of the tunnel, do you think? Do you see any?
I do, but it's a very dim light. It's a very long tunnel. As I said earlier on, there are a lot of issues that weren't dealt with, that were just swept under the mat. And and like right now, they've been building and building and building and building. So it's only gonna get worse from here. That is like...
Are you talking about racism? Whites and blacks?
Well, the racial divide, first of all. That was the biggest issue of apartheid. And that was not addressed. What was done was that, like, let's forgive and forget. Wounds were still raw, very raw. So the fact that you're going to dismiss the anguish and the pain of millions of South Africans of color, like, that was kind of like an insult. And that is why most of us are so disenfranchised by the way this country is being run.
So Tuto, the Rainbow Nation, this great global model of reconciliation, this wonderful constitution that South Africa produced, it's all a bit of a fiction, is it, do you think? Hasn't quite worked out.
Well, you can't get over 200 years of oppression in like 20 years. It's gonna take some time, and that's the thing that like people don't understand globally. We're still healing as a nation. We're still wounded. And we just got our heart kicked again by a party that pretends to, I think that it does care for its people, but it doesn't really come off that way.
The ANC?
Yeah.
Do you think then, Tuto, that change when it comes, real change, the change that you want, will come again from the students, as it did in the 70s, perhaps again now? It'll be driven by students.
I think so. The thing is, as youth, we have to keep an open mind to everything. Because what we're doing is we're not taking care of the country for us. We're taking care of the country for the next generation, and so forth and so on. So, like, the thing is, people should try to get it out of their heads that, like, oh no, what happens now should happen now. No. There are still youngers that are still growing up. I have a little sister, and, like, I don't want her to grow up I don't want her to experience racism in any way. You understand? Because they don't deserve that. There's inequality because if you think about it, rich and poor, white and black, it's like oranges and apples. You get me? It's the same thing on either scale, because the majority of the most wealthy people and the ones that live in the greatest neighborhoods, the ones that get the best education, the best medical aid, are white. And black people are just left to just dry in the air, like just twist. And that's the most messed up part, because there are a lot of kids out there that want to make it, that have a vision of where they want to see themselves. But they can't actually get there because of the lack of infrastructure.